Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, quarterback edition. We are right here in the middle of August. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. Joining me, as always, the one, the only, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. Dwain, happy Monday.
Yeah, man, happy Monday. I haven't talked to Ian, and actually, we didn't talk live all weekend, like we texted some. So yeah, I need some Ian this morning. Of course, I'm super excited about our guest, but I don't want to steal your thunder like I did with Evan last week, Ian. So I'll be quiet.
We do have another guest. The tripod booth is back. The connoisseur of context, fake football meteorologist, the sharp football analysis, the Swami of Konami, Rich Hribar at Lord Reeves. Rich, thanks for coming on again, man. This is time number 3, I think. Great day to be great, brother.
Yeah, it is a great day to be great. And listen, everyone's coming to Ohio this week. So, I'm going to see you guys. I'll see Dwain for the first time. Last year at the Expo, someone thought I was Dwain, and I talked to this person for like 5 minutes. It was pretty good. And, he's talking to me. He's like, oh, I like your work. I'm like, cool, man. Thanks. That's too kind. And he's like, yeah. So how do you like working at Pro Football Focus? And I was like, oh, who does this guy think I am? And yeah, he was like, oh, you're Dwain McFarland, right? And I was like, no, but Dwain's pretty great. I wish he was here too. So we're going to see Dwain this year in person.
Big same.
Yeah.
Dwain
and people will know now because Reeves, like, I've heard you're tall, right?
I'm like, I don't know what tall.
You're probably tall compared to me. I'm 5'9", so like they'll see us next to each other, and if you're like 6'3" or something, yeah, everyone in my family's tall except for me and like my uncle. Like everybody's like 6'1" plus.
Yeah, the fantasy industry oddly has like a lot of tall dudes in it. It's like I don't consider myself tall, consider what we're around, but yeah, there's a lot of tall people in the fantasy space.
Reeves, you saw the kids coming up the industry there last year, man. Like I consider myself a fairly big guy. I go to the gym a good amount. I saw some kids I don't want to fuck with up there, man.
No, man. I mean, dude, Cody Carpentier and Zach Kruger were walking around like an 80s WWE tag team. Like I was like, they were walking around next to each other. It was just a lot of shoulder. There was no necks at all. I was not getting involved. Listen, man, those are my boys. I was like, I'm making friends with these guys.
Yeah, you better clarify that they are your boys now that you're
gonna
get yourself into some trouble. Gonna be turning around looking for me and Ian, and we're gonna be nowhere to be found.
Gonna be a very fun fantasy football expo up in Canton, Ohio this weekend for sure. Guys, we do got a little bit of work to do before this weekend. Again, Rich, thank you for coming on. And we just want to kind of go through all things at quarterback. Not going to go quarterback by quarterback. I think we've already kind of touched on that throughout the summer, our team previews and things like that. But want to get some takes on, who exactly we're targeting, what our general strategy is. And on that latter point, Rich, do you have a general strategy you've been kind of deploying at the quarterback position so far this draft season?
So things have really kind of shifted at the quarterback position in recent times. I'd like to take some credit for it. I don't know how much I'm actually allowed to have, though, for it. But you look at last year, top 24 quarterbacks in ADP carried a R-squared, a correlation of 0.5826 to points per game after 0.495 the year before in 2020. So in other words, 58% and 50% of all fantasy output per game that quarterbacks scored the past years can just be traced back to ADP. Simple as that. For the previous 10 years from 2010 to 2019, it was just 21%. I mean, this is a massive, massive difference in draft accuracy. Either we've gotten really, really lucky or we've kind of cracked the code a little bit on what we're doing here. So just get some added context here from a weekly stance. Top 12 quarterbacks in ADP, QB1s in ADP, they combine for 52% of all QB1 scoring weeks in the season. You say, oh, yeah, that makes 52%, half of them. Yeah, it's fine. They accounted for 65% of all top 6 scoring weeks in the season, 79.6% of all top 3 scoring weeks of the season, and 16 of the 18 weekly high scorers on the season were QB1s. The other 2 were Joe Burrow, who was QB13 in ADP, and Tyler Huntley, who had that magical game against the Packers. So things have really kind of shifted here into how to approach this. The days of late round quarterback and streaming a quarterback are a lot harder than they've ever been. So now I'm kind of like where I'm going to monitor the first tier of quarterbacks. I'm going to turn like late round quarterback into like late round quarterback 1. So I'm looking at, who's going to fall between Josh Allen, who never does, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and Kyler Murray. Like monitor that tier. Let's try to catch maybe the last of that tier where they fall in a palatable range. If they don't, then hey, if the room's aggressive, I'm going to keep waiting. And then I'm going to try to get on to the next tier of quarterbacks. And typically Russell Wilson has been my favorite guy of like the back half of the QB ones that have gotten the most often. But that's kind of how I'm playing. I mean, we have, like I said, we either been really lucky the last 2 years or we've kind of cracked the code a little bit.
Yeah. So Rich, just like specifically, looking at the other tiers, right, at the other positions, like, because I think that's the other thing that comes into play, like, at least for me, when I start looking at when would I consider pulling the trigger, and you've probably seen some of my stuff, my threads, just like for me, it's been really big Kyler Murray in round 5 or 6, really big on Jalen Hurts in round 6. I would throw in Trey Lance now, round 9, round 10, really aiming for the dual threat guys. I did notice something, similar to what you were talking about. I kind of took it from a little bit of a different approach, but what I noticed was that the number 1 QB is outscoring the QB 12 by more, more and more over the last several years, right? The gap's growing, but the gap between QB 1 and QB 6 is not as large as we have more of the dual threat options. I think that's part of it. That doesn't answer all of it. Some of it is just, like a Tom Brady, right? Having a great passing season. Used to, like, that's what we had to count on, right? These outlier passing seasons. But now with these rushing floors, it seems like if you can just get one inside the top 6, maybe even top 7 this year, if it's Trey Lance, like, I'm really into that. But the other part of it really are the tier breaks. So it's like when I get to a spot in the draft and I start looking at the receivers that are available, right? I look at the tight ends that are available, the other positions, and that's kind of my trigger where I'm like, okay, I'm pivoting over to the quarterbacks here. Have you considered anything similar to that? And if so, like, what does that range look like for you where you would make the pivot?
Yeah, and that's going to vary draft by draft, like you said, where those tiers go up. I mean, me and Ian are currently in an industry apex draft where like wide receivers are just always so like ridiculous in that league. So like the tiers completely alter. So if the room's going to let quarterback slide, you're allowed to let quarterback slide too with it. You've got to always kind of play the room, how it's going. One of the other things too that I think is really interesting in context, because we keep saying the last 2 years, right? Well, what's happened the last 2 years? Football has been played in the most unique climates it's ever been played in the last 2 years. And I'm curious to see if we have any type of, regression coming in that form in terms of 2022. I mean, we assume, fingers crossed, that COVID is going to have the lowest impact it's had in an NFL season in the past 3 years this year. We'll see if that remains to be true. But other things that have really impacted things outside of the pandemic, that tie into it are, home field advantage 2 years ago and the splits that regressed last year. Also, offensive penalties are way down the past 2 years. Offensive holding has been called and sacks have been reduced the last years. It's the first time in a decade we've had quarterbacks with a sack rate below 6% in over a decade. And part of that too is, teams aren't blitzing as much anymore because everyone wants to play 2 high safeties. Everyone's tired of hearing that, but like that's still a thing. And you're going to see a lot more of that this year. NFL defense are just a lot more aggressive. So there's all these things that have like gotten cooked into these past 2 years that still have some volatility to them because we haven't really come out of this yet. Not even as people in society. So like the NFL hasn't come out of it yet too. I wrote an article on that earlier in the season. It's one of the things that I kind of just want to nerd it up a little bit. No one's really talked about like the pandemic's influence on fantasy football either, but it's totally has had a thumbprint on the past year's fantasy.
Great points all around, Rich. And I did look at something where I know you had the top 24 quarterbacks showing how we're better than ever predicting those. Same exact thing, just exclusive to the top 12, like better than ever over these past 2 years. Will be very interesting to see how 23 and 24 comes along. We're actually in 2 drafts going up against each other right now. Rich also in Dr. Evan Porras' injury-prone invitational. Now, this is a super flex draft and quarterbacks. Okay, maybe we have a few different tier differences and running backs being pushed up in standard leagues, but standard half PPR, obviously not really impacting our quarterback, just how we're kind of valuing them. But Rich, obviously Superflex changes things. You had the 101. You went Jonathan Taylor over Josh Allen as the 102. I was very happy to get Josh Allen in my lap. What made you go JT at first overall? And is that something that you consistently doing in Superflex?
I'm not gonna lie, I honestly forgot this was a 2 quarterback league.
Dude, Rich, I feel bad now because I didn't know. Ian didn't tell me it was you earlier. He goes, I got Josh Allen at the 102, and I said, what moron lets you do that in a super flex?
Rich, I wasn't positive. I wasn't positive either. That's why I didn't pre-draft last night. I just wanted to double check.
That's exactly what I did when he got on and said, hey, this thing starts in the morning. Make sure you pre-draft. I had the 101, and it was just a byproduct of me doing too many leagues at once and not really paying attention. It was 100% my fault. I'm gonna make this shit work though. I'm gonna make this work. But totally, honestly, man, just total brain collapse on my part. I
Fair
just
enough.
totally forgot the settings.
That's how it gets when you're in this many leagues. So, okay, had you known it was a super flex, the ones I've been in, Rich, because, I think sometimes if you're someone out there, you're joining your first 2 quarterback league, you get there like the 108 or 109, you're like, oh my God, I can still get this wide receiver or running back. More times than not, though, I like to get my 2 quarterbacks and then deal with the rest of the roster.
Yeah, especially for all the reasons we just laid out. If that's something that's going to be static, I mean, it's just harder to get production out of the deeper you go. Yeah. So I'm going to definitely have some work to do the rest of this thing. At least I have Jonathan Taylor, I guess. I mean, I'm going to at least ride that wave. But yeah, if it was
never bad to have JT. I mean, come on.
If I would have been, cognizant of what was going on, I would have taken Josh Allen.
Which leads us to our next point, everyone. Always make sure you check those league rules before you get going. All right, Rich. So, this morning when I did happen to get Josh Allen, it felt good because I really haven't gotten him on many teams at all this year. Dwayne had his recent fade list article where, he specifically says like, this is not relative to ADP. He just specifically hates these players personally, of course. And Josh Allen was, of course, on that. I kid. But have you found yourself like, even like in best ball land, Rich, like willing to pay up for Josh Allen? Because it's wild to me, like how we have this consensus like QB1, but at the same time, everyone I kind of talk to seems pretty willing to fade him in round 3. But my goodness, man, like if there's any quarterback out there, it's just going to blow up the position. We all kind of agree it's Josh.
Yeah, still no, not really. I mean, as much as things have changed to shift towards, the front of quarterbacks being good, it's still hard to be the first guy in line. I mean, the last time the QB1 in ADP has finished even higher than the QB4 was 10 years ago. So the last time a QB1 was even the QB1 overall was Aaron Rodgers in 2011. Also, Josh Allen, he's got to go against the field again. I mean, the last time a quarterback was the QB1 overall in 3 straight years was Brett Favre in the mid-90s. Yeah. So even when you look at last year and Josh Allen running it back-to-back years, Justin Herbert still produced 95% of Josh Allen's points. Tom Brady still produced 93% of his points. When you compare that to like running back and wide receiver and tight end, I mean, the leverage just isn't there, if we're not talking 2 QB and Superflex. So, I mean, I'm a big time fan of Josh Allen. He's arguably the most fun quarterback we've had on a per-play basis in my lifetime. Just for the extreme highs and like kind of lows. He plays like
from the double coverage throw into a fullback to what we have now.
Yeah, I mean, he's throwing the ball behind him. This dude he's a physical profile of Cam Newton. He kind of has like the howitzer of John Elway. He's got improv skills like, old Fran Tarkenton videos. And he's got kind of like the YOLO decaf of Brett Favre. Like he just kind of has the whole package of like, it's just super fun. You don't know what's going to happen on a play-to-play basis. And I just can't take him at where he goes in fantasy drafts.
So the biggest question I get on Josh Allen, Rich, because people know where I stand, but you know how they'll DM me and I get they're a bit like, where would you be willing to take Josh Allen? Like how far, like, does he have to fall? And so where I've done it, especially in best ball, is if I ever see him around past ADP and I'm trying to draft, 100 teams, like that's how I'm going to get my exposure to Josh Allen. Over in redraft, I thought about it a little bit more. Honestly, it would be further. I think it's probably more like 18 to almost 2 rounds past, which you're never going to get him there unless you're, to y'all's point, you're in an industry draft. Then you could probably get the draft Josh Allen. But in most typical leagues, right, he's not going to fall that far. But I think that's the answer I would give. And again, like my thought process is kind of looking at, well, what's the opportunity costs? Plus, who are the potential arbitrage plays we still have? And like, what's the price tag on those? And I think, so it's probably still around 18 picks before I would pull the trigger. Because right now in Yahoo, he's going at the end of round 2. Jeez. Over in ESPN, he's going early round 3. So the price tag in home leagues is really high.
Yeah, 100%. And like you say, even being the first guy still, you're still not setting the market of the room, right? Like I'm always with the question. I want to read the room a little bit and I want to see how the room's going to handle each position. And if you're still the first guy that takes Josh Allen or first gamer that takes Josh Allen, you don't know when QB2 is coming off the board still. It's not like you force the issue. You don't know.
The worst feeling, you do it, and it's like another 30 picks. And
yes.
You're like, yes. Oh, my God, I could have had. Yeah, it's the worst.
I love that Rich mentioned the Brett Favre being the last quarterback with 3 straight overall QB1 performances, because I'll do that same thing, Rich, where like, we start going, you go back 10 years, and there's still like no one that's matched it. And it's like, all right, Here we go. Let's refill a cup of coffee. Let's go back 50 years and like see what's going on here. So Josh Allen repeating as Fantasy's overall QB1. The last guy to do it 2 years in a row was Dante Culpepper in 03 and 04. Other all-time quarterbacks over the last 50 years to do it twice. So we have Allen, Culpepper, Dan Fouts, Roger Staubach, Kenny Anderson, the only 2 quarterbacks to do it 3 straight years in a row, Brett Favre, and right before him, Steve Young. So
in a row.
That's wild. Steve Young from 92 to 94, and then Favre from 95 to 97. What a time to be alive. I guess you boomers were actually probably.
Listen, Steve Young was my favorite quarterback growing up.
Were you guys doing it, counting up the stats in the newspaper, however the hell you guys did it?
Yeah, he was by far my favorite quarterback growing up, man. I mean, he was he was what the apex of Konami was, because he could run and he was an elite passer. You got it both, and you just smashed. That's why I think he actually had 4 years in a row where he was number 1 in points per game. Damn. He missed time. Steve Young was known to miss some games here and there, but man, I love Steve Young.
I always see him popping up on these like best all-time quarterback runs lists. And it's just absolutely out of this world. I think Dwayne's been trying to curse me, but
no, I'm good.
And Dwayne's a Cowboys guy, so he probably hated Steve Young.
No, it's funny. Like my middle son Landry and I, named after Tom Landry, like we bonded around Steve Young because he loves playing Madden Ultimate Team. And back when I used to have a job that paid a lot, unlike fantasy football, like I would just buy a Madden Ultimate Team pack. I was buying my son's love, Rich. And I remember we pulled the golden, I don't know, that was golden ticket or whatever, and we got the Steve Young that year. I guess he had already been like an ultimate player, and then someone turned him into like the ultra version. And dude, we were just killing people with Steve Young. I mean, I liked the passing, he liked the rushing, and we would trade. We would go online and play matches, but we would trade the remote like after every. You know, I'm old when I say remote, like the controller. Damn it, we would trade. After every play. And of course he would immediately just go scrambling. They would have to have full on contain, and then they hand the controller back to the boomer, and you better have your passing game ready. You better have your pass defense ready, Rich.
We are talking to Swami of Konami here, of course. So let's talk about the rest of these dual threats real quick, Rich. So we have Kyler, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Trey Lance. We'll leave Fields out of it for the moment. Between Kyler, Lamar, Jalen, Trey Lance, each of them, maybe Lamar goes round 4 from time to time, but kind of seeing Lamar and Kyler usually rounds 5, 6, Hurts round 6, maybe round 7, Trey Lance, as Dwayne said before, maybe closer to round 9. How would you rank them all, also considering that cost?
So factoring in cost, I have them Kyler. Kyler just has that kind of like we talked about Steve Young, like he has the kind of the best of both worlds. If like you were to hit a ceiling in both areas, I mean, he could potentially throw for 5,000 yards, maybe rush for another 700, have like those 40 combined touchdowns or plus. So like I would have him first. I have Hurts second, then I would have Lance and then Lamar. And I know that probably is maybe shock some people being the Swami of Konami and not really being in on Lamar. He's one of my least favorite quarterbacks at ADP though. Because when you look at Lamar, I mean, the surrounding talent still is a major question mark. I mean, it's very thin at the top. If anything happens to Mark Andrews or Rashad Bateman, like we're relying on a lot of guys. Then you look at the Ravens schedule. They have one of our worst projected passing schedules this season. I mean, he gets the Jets in week 1, which you love, but then the following month he gets the Dolphins, the Patriots, the Bills, and the Bengals. Then he still has the Bucks, the Browns, and the Saints, even before his bye. Lamar as a passer against top 10 passing defense in his career averages just 6.1 yards per pass attempt. Last year it was just 5.3 yards. And, we have the 2019 version of Lamar in our heads. We're going to hold it in our heads for a long time because he can always reach that. But where has the ceiling been? He's been a floor quarterback since then. He just has 4 top 3 scoring weeks since 2019. He had 9 that season in 2019. So I look at his layout compared to Jalen Hurts, and everything that Jalen Hurts does is arguably the same, and the situation is just better. He's got a better offensive line. He's got better up and down pass catchers. He's got a better schedule. So, I mean, it's hard for me to not take, Hurts over Lamar, and Lamar always goes before him. So, he's not my least favorite quarterback at ADP, but, man, I'm not that into Lamar's ADP right now.
Yeah, man, I love Kyler. Had him as the number 2 since like March. Ian has him as his number 2 as well. And like in a nutshell, what you just said, right? Talking about, I mean, I even said, look, if anyone could pass for 5,000 and rush for 1,000. I think the only person on the list is Kyler. Not saying, to your point, like, is he really going to hit both max outcomes right in each category? That it would be a crazy season, but it could happen. So just curious with you on Kyler, knowing, the way ADP works out, like where are you in drafts where you're typically like, okay, I got to take him here. I'm not letting him pass. And I know rooms are different. Let's just say typical drafts that, most people are going to play in.
Yeah, I think once we get to like that wide receiver kind of like 36ish to 40ish range, I've already almost, by the time Kyler comes up, I have an anchor running back, or I have 2 running backs by then, so I'm not really cared. I'm not where Kyler goes, I'm not even looking at running backs really at that point anyways, so it doesn't matter. So kind of it's just where the wide receiver position is dried up and where I've started, because if I'm going anchor, I might already have 4 or 5 wide receivers, and I feel really good. One might play for the Cardinals. I might feel even extra incentivized to grab him. If I've double tapped running back, you're someone that's tweeted about this a few times too. I mean, because the archetypes of running backs that are available in rounds 2 and 3 this year. This is the first year in fantasy football I've been playing it. Those types of guys were never available in those rounds. So we've got a lot of fun ways to approach fantasy football from the start of draft. So typically it kind of goes, I'm looking mostly at where the wide receiver tiers are, because no matter what the format is, I'm not playing it. I don't know if anyone's still playing in just any flat standard leagues anymore. Mostly everyone's at least in half-point PPR. But so I'm actually looking to kind of see where like the wide receivers kind of hit that like firewall and die, like we kind of are in this Apex draft where Robert Woods is already off the board.
I was going to say real quick, there. Give folks like just, it doesn't have to be all your names, but 1 or 2 names that kind of represent like from a receiver perspective, just to give people an idea, like what are those receiver names where you're saying pretty much pivoting to Kyler?
Yeah, Hunter Renfrow, Christian Kirk, like those types of guys. Yeah. Like those types of guys. And that's not to dunk on it's not to dunk on those players.
No.
That's where I'm looking to make that move.
And that's kind of been like doing just a bunch of drafts with Dwayne. I think that's what's so valuable, like going through them. And so I would suggest to people, if you're trying to just get ready for your 1 or 2 drafts, just go spend like $5 or $10 at Underdog, because you're going to get better reps than if you just go on these mock draft lobbies that I think a lot of people tune out of more quickly than not, because you find these patches of players are like, yeah, we love the quarterbacks in rounds 5 or 6. The wide receivers or the running backs definitely aren't so great, and the wide receivers drop off. So that's when we're taking quarterbacks. And, Dwayne's done great work showing how basically no matter what build you have after the first 6 rounds 7 through 11, as long as you play your cards right, you should be able to fill a lot of the holes you still have there. So yeah, really about not reaching too early. And from that point, Rich, you talked about Lamar being someone that you're not buying much at cost. What do you say he is, him, Josh Allen? Is there maybe another top 12 quarterback at ADP you just haven't been getting much of at all? Because personally, Joe Burrow at QB8, I probably haven't been getting much of all of him, just because I don't see that big of a difference between Burrow and what someone like, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, like, okay, give me Joe Burrow for sure. But when I can get Kirk Cousins 40 picks later or so, I'm usually just taking that value.
Yeah, and that's the guy. I mean, Lamar, I don't love at cost, but like I'm cognizant, like if Lamar's going to fall like QB8 in my room, then like I know what he represents for upside as well. Joe Burrow is a little bit different here. I mean, in Gen Pop leagues that are coming up and ramping up, I mean, he's going like the QB6 in a lot of those leagues, which is pretty baffling. I mean, look at him last year. He paced position twice in scoring, which you love. But he had 7 weeks as the QB 16 or lower. I'm very suspect on his head coach. I'm very suspect on his layout. He had the 3rd easiest schedule last year, and he still carried that like real high variance for fantasy. I do think he'll run a little bit more like we saw in the playoffs, but he actually wasn't that good in the postseason either. And you look at the Bengals from a top-down view, like I have a hard time believing that just like the talent didn't overcome Zach Taylor a little bit. At first down play calls in neutral game script, they were 3% below pass rate expectation. Burrow ended the year 16th in pass attempts on first down, despite being, 5th in completion rate on first down, 2nd in passing touchdown, 4th in yards per pass attempt. This is a team that is slow. They were 29th in the league at pace of play. They were 30th in pace of play in neutral game script. I mean, it's really kind of hard to like really love the approach that they had with all the talent they had. Maybe that was some of his ACL related. They have young receivers. There's plenty of room for scoring growth, but the Bengals also have our 32nd ranked passing schedule this year. They draw 11 opponents that were in the top 13 of pass efficiency blend last year, which is efficiency allowed plus explosive plays allowed. We know the Bengals lived on some explosive plays. Joe Burrow's openly talked about that he anticipates how much two eye safety drop again, drink, that how much he anticipates teams are going to play two eye safeties against the Bengals. And when you think about their offensive line being beefed up, like, to me, that's a raging signal that, like, Joe Mixon's going to run against some light boxes with a better offensive line a lot. And I like that. And then you look at their layout, going back to their layout here, weeks 14 through 18. I know that's a pie in the sky view. The NFL is very fluid and things oscillate on a dime. But, I mean, in the fantasy playoff zone, the Bengals face the Browns, the Buccaneers, the Patriots, Bills, and the Ravens. I mean, that's as daunting as a close to a season like any team has. And Burrow last year, he faced just 6 top 10 pass defenses, 7.3 yards per pass attempt in those games, 236 passing yards per game in those games compared to 8.6 yards per pass attempt and 319 yards per passing game otherwise. Not really getting a lot of rushing, even if he does run more. Like you said, I'm able to arbitrage Joe Burrow. Right. I'm not worried about it. Maybe a Kirk Cousins, maybe a Derek Carr, maybe a Tua Tagovailoa. As much as I love Joe Burrow, he's super cool. He's got a lot of swag. He's from Cincinnati. Real tough, man. Real tough.
Yeah, we talked about arbitrage plays for Burrow earlier this season, Ian. It was those exact names, Cousins, Carr. We were throwing those names out.
Well, you look at him last year, man, arguably the most efficient quarterback in the league, and he was the QB 10 in fantasy points per game. Like, it's just tough when you have, to Rich's point, basically a 0 rushing floor. Like, unless you're Tom Brady and, like, just easily outpacing the league in terms of total pass attempts, like, they're playing a different position.
Yeah.
Burrow has to throw 40 touchdowns. There's no way around it. If you're taking it QB6, he has to throw 40 touchdowns, which he can. He could, but you have to.
So someone that has actually made a habit of throwing 40 touchdowns, 37 last year, 48 the year before, Aaron Rodgers. Guys, the QB 14 over Underdog Fantasy. Are we messing this up? Are we going to look back 2 months from now and just be like, what the hell were we doing ranking Aaron freaking Rodgers QB 14? Obviously, we don't have Devontae Adams, but it is Aaron Rodgers, guys. Like, Rich, have you found yourself, and again, I have him, I think 12th or 13th. So I'm not making a big stand against it, but Dwayne likes to look at players and be like, hey, are we going to look at this player eventually and just like, could it cost us? Could he win your league for you? I'm not quite sure that's in Rodgers, I don't know if an overall QB1 season is range of outcomes, but he's still Aaron freaking Rodgers, Rich. How have you kind of dealt with the losing Devontae Adams from that offense and how big of an impact that will be for Aaron Rodgers? Because I believe I looked it up recently and, hey, obviously Devontae is going to be replaced to some extent, but let's say we just take away every single touchdown pass Devontae Adams scored over the past 2 years, Rodgers would still be 9th in the NFL in total passing touchdowns. So it really might be one of these things where, not trying to take any credit away from Devontae Adams, obviously, but maybe Aaron Rodgers can still be a top 10 fantasy quarterback without him.
It's definitely possible. I think the room has it right. I think the public has it right. I mean, obviously, we talked about how we valued the position, the archetype of the position that has infiltrated the top of ADP, and he just doesn't fit that mold. And, especially factoring in his age and how little he's run at this stage of his career, I mean, it's just hard for him to crack that tier. You even see with Brady. Brady led the league in every single passing stat you could think of, and look where he goes still, because everyone knows the dude doesn't run. So you have your margin for error is so thin. On one hand, Rodgers does have over 500 dropbacks the past 6 years without Devontae Adams on the field, and his rate stats don't take a major hit, and some of them even look even better. He's played 10 full games without Adams, excluding regular season finales over that span. And in those games, you've seen a lot of the splits people use. He's had 22 fantasy points per game. He's had 6 QB1 scoring weeks. He's had just 1 week lower than QB 15. The floor has been there for Aaron Rodgers, even without Devontae Adams. But he has found it harder to access a ceiling without Devontae Adams. He's had just 3 weeks higher than QB7 on that 10-game sample. And then, you factor in the sample of where you're losing Devontae Adams. We see this all the time with Aaron Jones. It's not just you're missing Devontae Adams for 2 weeks and you adjust for that opponent and you find a game plan that works. Like, this is going without Devontae Adams now for the entire season. Yeah. It's not going to be different than just those games, right? When plugging 2 games worth of we don't have him, and we're going to use Aaron Jones more in the passing game. We can't really use a lot of those splits. And remember, we're just 2 years removed away from Aaron Rodgers being the QB 14 in points per game, and everyone kind of questioning like the potential decline of Aaron Rodgers. Like that wasn't that long ago. It was before ayahuasca, but like It wasn't that long ago. So I believe he's kind of fairly priced given the landscape of the position, especially, when we factor in, like I said, he doesn't run anymore. He's another one of these guys, like for him to obliterate ADP, he's going to have to win a third straight MVP and flirt with 40 plus touchdowns. And it's really kind of hard to expect that.
So Rich, let's talk about a different guy here. Deshaun Watson. Like, what are you doing? Like, I get this question all the time too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, such a wide range. Look, let's be honest. Like, I have no clue what's going to happen, with the legal situation. At first we thought, well, it's going to be 6 games. We're pretty sure the league would appeal. They did. Now we know that they're probably wanting a minimum of 1 year. But then you hear, well, maybe Deshaun Watson, if this goes a certain way, could play week 1. I mean, I don't know. But at the end of the day, we know it's a very talented player, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously the risk is high, but the ADP is also low. Are there any roster constructions, like when you're sitting there drafting and you're towards, your later rounds, round 13, 15, in that range where you're like, I'm going to put Watson on the squad for X reason? Are there any scenarios like that, or is he just a player that you're avoiding?
In one quarterback leagues, he's not even really on my draft board. I mean, it's just hard to kind of like expect him to play, just have that kind of taken out of your hands. And we can always kind of make up some of the like production versus the field, even though if we can't get, Deshaun Watson as apex, he's one of those players that we talk about, like Kyler. You can get the best of both worlds. And he's been, QB4 in points per game or better in each of the past 3 years he's played. But here's the thing, in one quarterback leagues, not every league allows suspended players to be placed on injured reserve. Some do. And if they do, then, more power to you. So if you have shallow benches and he's got to eat a roster spot for half of the fantasy regular season, because remember the Browns bye is week 9. So even if the 6 game sticks, it's 6 plus 1 more. So it's 7 in your 14. It's just kind of hard to punt a roster spot in those formats. It's just too valuable. The roster spot's too valuable. Now in 2 quarterback and Superflex leagues, you can get a little cuter. And in best ball leagues, but we'll just remove that from there. But QB and Superflex, you can get a little cuter because you can insulate him with another QB you can to open up that platoon. He's going to make you want to reach to that QB3 a little earlier than you would, but it does give him a lot of more leverage in those types of leagues. So really, in one quarterback leagues, not really on my draft board. I'm just going to say that if he comes back and plays 10 games, the apex of Deshaun Watson's not going to bury me. That's not going to lose me fantasy leagues. Maybe in a 2 quarterback league, it will. But one quarterback leagues, I really can't see a scenario where I'm like willing to put him on a roster because I value roster spots.
Yeah, and real quick, so like go ahead, Ian, go.
I was gonna say I've been taking a similar approach with it, Rich, where like you can't rely, under no circumstances should Deshaun Watson be the first quarterback you pick. Now, because you've seen some drafts, and like Dwayne and I were looking at like the football guys, just where he's, you have a dot where he's going each draft, like probably the most volatile player from one draft to the next in terms of sometimes people might reach on him around 13, other times maybe he's going in the freaking last round of the draft. So it does depend on a little bit, the specific draft you're in as we're bringing it up. But, Dwayne, the only time we've been like pro Watson is like once you get past the first 15 or 16 quarterbacks, like once I'm looking at guys like, and no disrespect to them, but your Tuas, your Daniel Joneses of the world, like just guys that we know don't have that same sort of, top 5 upside. Dwayne, that's the only time where I'm really at this point leaning towards taking Watson.
Yeah, and again, kind of back to Rich's point, we're also, even though that's a 1 quarterback league we're talking about, it's 20 rounds, so you have the roster spot, if you want to use it. Most often we don't draft a QB2 in those leagues, because also you're drafting with a lot of other sharp drafters that don't draft a QB2 either, right? So there's plenty of guys left on the wire, but if you are going to take one and it's at the end and you're like, look, and I think where we've done it, Rich, is you build, just an awesome roster from top to bottom, but let's say really RB2 is your question and you've stacked up backs to fill RB2. You don't know who it's going to be. Like that kind of situation, sometimes I'm like, okay, well, let's just see what happens with Watson. Mm-hmm. Like if there is this true range of outcomes, because like at this point in the draft, like the only person that could feasibly replace a Kyler Murray if you took them, right, is Deshaun Watson. Otherwise, there's no real point like in taking any of these other, players. But if he's going to end up being suspended, for that long, again, like you are clogging a roster spot, in these leagues. That also means that the running back waiver wire extremely thin and they don't get dropped. Tight ends even are very thin over in those leagues. So back to your point, it really does matter with the league, but I think that's the only time I would really be willing to try it. And some of that's based on, like, we just know there's this wide range of what could happen, what could come out of, the situation right now. We'll get an inflection point here pretty quick, right? And we'll know more.
We hope.
Yeah, well, we hope. Yeah, we hope.
We thought, the last time it wasn't.
Well, we thought we had it.
Right. And that's when everything started to kind of shift. And then this last of the league going back and kind of rescinding this judgment kind of is what makes it really muddy, right? Like, how much it feels like the league is entrenched on, like, not letting this happen.
When we did our team preview podcast, like, assuming no Watson, then we did the assuming 6-game suspension Watson emergency pod. I'm sure we're going to have to roll a third one out there here sooner rather than later. Rich, okay. Favorite legit late round quarterback. Now I'm talking round 10 or later. So no Trey Lance, no Kirk Cousins, no Derek Carr, no Aaron Rodgers. Basically, not to spoil my pick, but from Justin Fields on, which one of these late round quarterbacks would you actually feel comfortable with? I feel like it's got to just be Justin Fields.
Yeah, I mean, I hold Fields higher up too, just because I feel like the situation can't be even as bad as it was last year. But my favorite quarterback is a guy you talked about. And I agree. He probably doesn't have that top 5 upside.
Oh, no.
But yeah, man, I want to go to bat for Tua for sure.
Whoa!
Because this Miami offense, man, I'm so in love with this, and maybe it's gonna be my undoing. But this is exactly the type of offense like every dude built in Madden, like growing up. It's 100% like the exact same offense. Like, all we did was get the fastest guys everywhere in free agency. Like, let's just get the fastest guys. We're sorting by one category, speed, and we're going to add them onto it. And I'll tell you why it's going to matter in a second here. But you look at Tua, obviously, I think we have to throw out just about everything that happened last year situationally in that Miami offense. The construct of that offense and what they had to do, the amount of RPO. They were running RPOs at almost a 50% rate, running play action, because they couldn't run the football. They didn't have any wide receivers that can get open. They had to get the ball out of Tua's hands. I don't think we're going to see that type of offense this year on any level. And Tua, like what we have seen translate to the NFL, is something that does translate historically to the NFL, and that's accuracy. I mean, this guy, coming out of college, 99th percentile in career yards per pass attempt, 96th percentile touchdown to interception ratio, 96th percentile career completion rate. These things have been static to his NFL game. And then you look at the way this team's constructed under the offensive line upgrades, getting Taron Armstead and Connor Williams, getting all just speed backs in this wide zone scheme. And then you look at what he was forced to throw to with Devontae Parker, Mike Gesicki last year, and then just Jalen Waddle being forced into this tertiary low ADOT, near the line of scrimmage target. The Dolphins, the past 3 years, have ranked 31st, 32nd, and 29th in touchdowns scored outside the red zone the past 3 years. Look at these guys that they added. Tyreek Hill has scored 40 career touchdowns outside the red zone. That's the most in the NFL since he entered the league. The next highest player has 28. Chase Edmonds, 36% of his career touchdowns scored outside the red zone. Raheem Mostert, 50%. Cedric Wilson, 63%. I mean, no matter how you want to play it, like, the Dolphins just have players that are going to create their own touchdowns, where Tua is not. And you still have Jalen Waddle getting now hopefully extended into a role that we saw that he can access, in college. So, I mean, I look at this offense. I mean, they look at the plethora of things they can do. They can put a fullback on the field and play bully ball depending on what set you come on. They can go in a 3-by-1 and play Mike Gesicki, Cedric Wilson, and Jalen Waddle one side and Tyreek Hill on ISO. They can do so many different things. This is the matter. If I was building an offense in 1 year free agency, I mean, the Dolphins kind of did a lot of things that I would want to do.
And I think, like, people, what they can point back to, Rich, is like, we also see quarterbacks from this scheme occasionally just pop, right, and have a big year. We saw it with Matt Ryan when Kyle Shanahan was with, the Falcons, right, when he had Julio Jones and he had, Tevin Coleman was kind of the joker. They moved around. You had Devonta Freeman. Like, so, yeah, I think, we've talked about this a couple of times. Like, you don't know for sure what you're going to get, though, right? Mm-hmm. Because we've also seen a guy like Jimmy G get to play in an offense very similar, not quite as loaded as this one, but San Francisco has really good, surrounding talent. And he was never able to come through. But then we get these seasons like what we've seen in the past with Matt Ryan. Heck, you can even go back to Matt Schaub back in his day with the Texans, under the Shanahan kind of scheme when they had Andre Johnson, Kevin Walter. We're going way back. Owen Daniels, Arian Foster. Yeah, those names don't sound as good as these, as much as we like those. So, yeah, I think those are some good points. When you look at, this offense, and I know we're talking about quarterbacks here, but I just have to ask you because, there's a lot of confusion, not confusion, but folks on the market, like, just wondering, like, what do we do with, Tyreek Hill? What do we do with Jalen Waddle? Is your Is your thought process on it like, look, Hill's still the number one. He deserves to be this round 2 pick. Or are you really more, okay, I just like the price tag of Waddle? I've been in a few drafts, man, where in sharp drafts where he's slipping into the 5th round now. Like, when the trade first happened, he knocked down to the end of the 3rd. Then he kind of rounded into the 4th. And now he's towards the end of the 4th round in a lot of these, FFPC style type drafts, and even making it into round 5. Any thoughts on those two?
Yeah, at first I hated it because they were both kind of going as low wide receiver ones almost, and I was like, oh, this is a lot to ask. For one, like you said, we're putting a lot into his basket to prop both these guys up, and then we're also counting on the role change. I mean, we have this almost a similar situation with Devontae Smith, coming off of a really strong rookie season, and then they immediately bring in like a legit guy that has alpha qualities and has commanded targets in the NFL. The cool thing about Tyreek Hill is like, even when he doesn't get the ball, he impacts the play. That's what's so great about this offense too. And then adding a guy like Tyreek Hill, I am not as concerned about Tyreek as much as the field is, because he's a guy that falls into the 3rd round a lot too, just because he's consistently been good no matter who's been throwing him the football. And I know there's a lot smaller samples outside of non-Patrick Mahomes quarterbacks, but I mean, this is a guy that was a top 5 quarterback with Alex Smith. We saw him live with Matt Moore over like a month when Patrick Mahomes' knee got dislocated. I still feel pretty high about his ceiling. Now, Tyreek is a guy that is a lot more volatile than your typical wide receiver ones. He has just 2 career games as a wide receiver 1 without a touchdown, just 4 games as a top 24 scorer without a touchdown in his career as well. So he does live on those touchdowns. He does create and score a lot of them. But if we were to say, all right, this move to Miami now does kind of ding his touchdown outlook, maybe he turns into a guy that has 8 touchdowns or 10 instead of a guy that has 12 or 15, then that does make him, it adds a lot more volatility to him at his price tag. But now that Waddle has kind of fallen, I think his ADP is more than palatable right now to grab him as a cheap guy too and play it. Because like I said, I just believe that kind of like the construct of this offense is really going to work. And maybe that's going to be an undoing of my analysis this year. But like, this is the way I would build an offense if I was building an offense, and I really want it to work.
Jalen Waddle or Deontay Johnson?
Oh, give me Waddle. Deontay is one of my least favorite players to draft.
Dealing with a hip flexor now, Dwayne. Just came out.
Who is?
Deontay, apparently.
Yeah. There's not a Pittsburgh Steeler you can talk me into drafting before like maybe Chase Claypool, and I still need maybe a little bit of massaging on that.
It's pretty rough. All right, last thing on Tua, because the one thing I struggle to get past is like we saw Jimmy G last year average 8.6 yards per attempt. I mean, 2019, 8.4. Like, we don't care about style points in fantasy. Those dumbass 6-inch pop passes he gives to Debo, like those are passing yards. So we should be loving it. But again, we've never confused Jimmy G with this guy we're targeting in fantasy. So I'm like, all right, if Jimmy G could be one of the most efficient quarterbacks on a per throw basis, like, and even he couldn't be this great fantasy quarterback, why should we expect that from Tua when, okay, we have a slight, you can't have a lower rushing floor than Jimmy G, but we also know that Tua isn't exactly giving us a ton there. So Rich, we would have to think that they're going to throw the ball more. And on the one hand, you look at all those weapons that you named, and yeah, that would make sense. On the other hand, if we try to go back and we say, all right, Mike McDaniel, what's the offense going to look like? We have seen, run first, slower paced offenses with Kyle Shanahan. So just overall, I guess, what do you kind of expect this offense to look like? And then if you have kind of a more like general philosophy for looking at basically coaches that come from the Shanahan, the LaFleur, the McVay kind of coaching trees, where like, unfortunately, we've never really seen them call plays. Like, how much emphasis do you put on what the head coach did while they were coordinating?
Yeah, and that's kind of a tricky thing, but I do think that the way the Dolphins have kind of set up this signal is they're going to be a lot more multiple than the 49ers were. And I think we saw that happen midway through the season last year when the 49ers started running a lot more 11 personnel, where they started using kind of like Juwan Jennings as kind of like that bigger body on the outside to help run block and then free things up. Because a lot of people misconstrue the Deebo Samuel role last year. A lot of it happened due to the depth of the 49ers backfield getting exposed. But then also, as you took this player that was at the time a complete alpha wide receiver that was destroying people as a true alpha X wide receiver, and then we're going to go into 11 personnel and we're able to run the football, then what do you do as a defense now? We're going to come out, we're going to show you 11, but guess what? If you're going to come out and play nickel or you're going to play some dime coverage, we're going to run the football with this guy. And I think that Miami's going to bring some of that over. They've got the players to kind of do some of this with. And I think they're going to be a little more multiple play, a lot more 11, I think, than people think. That's why Cedric Wilson was a day one signing. Well, Cedric Wilson's only exclusively played slot receiver in his career. That was an immediate signal that Jalen Waddle was going to play a lot more outside this year. Then you add Tyreek Hill to the fold as well. So, yeah, I mean, you look at it last year, I mean, 39 of 59 carries Deebo Samuel had came out of 11 personnel. It wasn't they were moving him to running back. They found a complete leverage point to leverage on defenses. And that's why the thing of the next Deebo doesn't work as good, because you have to be an elite receiver first. You have to make people respect the 11 personnel package first to do that. And that's what the Giants are going to find out with Wan'Dale Robinson, right? Like if we don't care about Wan'Dale Robinson catching the football, then this isn't going to work. It's not going to work as well. Deebo was destroying people at that point as a wide receiver firsthand. And then you had to respect that, because what are you going to do? Are you trying to give up a 30-yard passing play, or are you trying to give up a 15-yard running play? Like, teams were inviting some of that. So, I mean, there's a lot that went into that. I think that the adjustments the 49ers made, I think Mike Daniel's going to bring some of that. Maybe, like I said, maybe I'm just putting too much faith in it. He's never called plays. He seems like a super cool, sharp dude, and I just want to give him the benefit of the doubt. But, yeah, I think that they're going to be a lot more multiple, though, than like the previous Shanahan offenses have been.
I love the way you're thinking about that. I think it's the closest thing, like hearing you talk about it that way, it's like the closest thing we've seen since when you had Gronk and Aaron Hernandez, right? In their heyday, and teams are like, well, crap, like, do we put someone out here to cover this guy, or are we going to stay heavy, and they're going to run routes. If we put someone out here to cover, like, they're going to run the ball, so yeah, I think it's to your point, like, it's just a major, like, strategic advantage, like that. Obviously they're deploying it like at this tactical level, but it really does put defenses in a bind. I love that breakdown.
I feel like out of all the people we've heard about getting the Deebo Samuel role, there hasn't been enough like Tyreek Hill talk to it. And no, he's not going to run between the tackles, but this dude's literally averaging an NFL high 7.7 yards per carry since entering the league. I mean, when he was a rookie, they would legit just put him at running back. I mean, that touchdown he had against the Titans, I think that safety probably still spinning. This offense could be a lot of fun, guys. I mean, they actually, these are the best passing wide receivers in the NFL, bar none. We got Mohamed Sanu out there, Cedric Wilson, Lynn Bowden, if he makes the squad, like maybe
I forgot Lynn Bowden.
Let's go, man. I'm keeping him on the dynasty squad one more year. Let's see what happens. So, okay, Tua, look, I understand I would guess he'll get drafted in most leagues, but that's probably about the bar. Justin Fields would be my pick down here, but after that, there's certainly kind of another drop off. So, Rich, this is more for best ball, even just someone you think could be like a weekly starter by end of the year, like a recommended stream. Your favorite late round quarterback. So we'll say an ADP outside the top 20 quarterbacks.
Yeah, he's a bad quarterback too. I don't know if he'll ever be a good quarterback, but I think it's we got to kick the can on Daniel Jones one last time.
Yeah,
just to find out. As lackluster as Jones even was last year, I mean, the Giants actually averaged 3.9 yards per play with him off the field last year, which is absolutely insane. That's like the situation how dire it was for the Giants to end last season. So obviously you add Dayball, everyone's on like the pulse of like, is he going to run more? And I believe he will. He's a guy that's averaged 26 yards per rushing game, per game on the ground so far through his career. So you get a little bit of that, even if he sucks. The Giants faced just 4 teams this year that are 16th, ranked higher than 16th in our projected passing schedule in terms of explosive plays and efficiency projected allowed this year. And just one of those teams come after week 5. So like after this kind of start to the season, it really looks like it opens up for the Giants to have a kind of footing on what this offense is going to look like. They're another team, probably going to be a nice little base 11 personnel team. They don't really have a tight end we want to trust on their roster yet. They have a midseason stretch that looks really good of like Jaguars, Seahawks, Texans, Lions all in a row, where like if you took him as your QB2, that might be a little hotbed. I mean, he's just got to be a better passer, though. There's like no way around it. I mean, this dude has been so bad the past 2 years. Think about this last year. Just 3 of his 15 end zone passes were touchdowns last year. The past 2 years, he's completed just 47% of his red zone passes. And, so when you look at like red zone, right, to me, that's when things condense, processing speed, ability to actually play the quarterback position get highlighted. The only players that have a worse completion percentage than him in the red zone the past year, Sam Darnold, Gardner Minshew. He's thrown just 12 touchdown passes on 101 red zone pass attempts the past 2 seasons. That touchdown rate only ranks higher than one player, and that's Tyrod Taylor, who's his backup.
But what's the concussion rate, Rich? Like once he's inside the 5 and they decide to run him?
I mean, we hope it's high. Not the concussion rate that they're running. Not that we hope the run
Rich
rate
is being mean.
We want him to run them though. I mean, we want Saquon to get his touches too. But,
there we go.
When you're looking at guys at the bottom, we've talked about though, like everyone's elevated the runners. Even Justin Fields, like you said, is kind of in like a no man's land. Like Daniel Jones is the one guy that can still run outside of Mariota, but we can't anticipate Mariota to start the whole year. That Daniel Jones is like the last guy to say, like, all right, there's some rushing here. And if you were to run into some like a good passing season, like you've got something to work with at least.
And look, I've seen the Mariota 40 time. He can do it. I saw the one game where Derek Carr got hurt after the first quarter, and Mariota was able to do his thing. Waller had the big game. Jones is way more of a willing runner, though. I mean, last year, Daniel Jones, 62 rush attempts in 11 games. I mean, Mariota's career high is 64. I mean, he was only hitting 60 back-to-back years with 15 games worth. So I like that call with Daniel Jones. And the Tyrod Taylor signing, man, that was the biggest tell for me that they're probably just going to run the wheels off there on Daniel Jones, see what can happen. We do know, I mean, just if you can balance out the box, take away the extra man with your quarterback in the run game, obviously going to help the efficiency. I'm not so sure either guy can take the same sort of beating Josh Allen has, but we'll see, man. Hey, Giants, we were talking with Evan Silva on this podcast last week, and it was just funny, man, because I asked Evan, like, when was the last time the Giants have actually made this many consecutive front office moves like didn't make you just shake your head necessarily? And Evan just kind of paused and was like, long time, man. It's been a minute there. So let's talk a couple more gross quarterbacks before we get out of here, Rich. Cut, stream, start are equivalent to kill, fuck, marry. Carson Wentz, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield.
I mean, we're cutting Baker. 59 career starts. He's been a QB1 scorer in just 16 of them. Remember, Baker was the QB5 in ADP, fellas, a couple years ago. That happened. We let that happen on our watch. I don't know who remembers it. Obviously, we're that drafted him.
Odell was a top 5 wide receiver. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, he had just set the rookie passing touchdown record coming off of it. Yeah, it was looking all right. And look where we are now. But, I mean, Baker just doesn't run enough. He's in a situation where his head coach could be the first head coach fired in season. We might see Matt Corral at some point play if that happens, but who knows? I guess if we're gonna, what's the Mary element to this? Stream or start? I guess, right? So start.
Yeah.
I guess start would be you default me into Jared Goff. I guess low marital bar status here. We'll just bank on the playmakers. DeAndre Swift, Amon-Ra, Hawkinson, the conglomerate of Jameson Williams and DJ Shark. In the good offensive line. Well, at least say that. I mean, there's not a lot of upside here, but we got at least the floor to work with in QB2 formats. Yeah. And then, Carson Wentz is the complete fuck quarterback, because you don't know what you're gonna get, man. He's hair on fire. He's almost like he's just not as fun as Ryan Fitzpatrick, but he's like that. That's how he plays. He gives you a little bit of rushing. He might try to run over a guy sometimes. Might run into a game that's useful, and also have a 4-game stretch where you're like, this is the worst quarterback I've ever seen play. So I guess that's how we'll roll it out with those guys.
Would you agree, though, Rich? And I think that those rankings are fine. But, when I've been drafting on Underdog, I see Tua at QB 17 going pick 134. Wentz is going 70 picks later. I just feel like if you need if you drafted a top 6 QB and you only need one more, or you're trying to get your third quarterback, I think we might be overestimating our ability to, discern these terrible QBs, maybe a little bit. Guys like Wentz, Goff, and I put them next to each other for a reason. They're QBs 26 through 28 Underdog, but even Baker, man, we've seen each of these guys have a lot more success in the NFL, albeit a couple years ago for several of them, than a lot of these other youngster quarterbacks going ahead of them.
Yeah, I mean, listen, at least I can at least be talked into Wentz, the YOLO status of Wentz. I can at least hear that side of it versus kind of the non-upside of it. That's why we're fucking and not marrying.
Although Dwayne, I'm pretty sure beginning of the offseason we were going over this. Your answer, which made sense, was pretty much well, I've seen the other guys suck for a less amount of time. So
yeah, sometimes you just got to go with who sucked less. I mean.
All right, Rich, 2 more questions for you. Second to last one. Do you ever sit down at night and just ponder what life might be like if Drew Lock winds up being really good?
You sent this, and I actually didn't think you were going to ask it. So I was like, wow, you two are typical there. No, I haven't. I think that the play last year where Drew Lock came in and did like the fake pitch against the Bengals and fumbled and had the run, that was like Drew Lock. Like that was it. That was.
But then he chased the guy down.
It was yeah.
He almost got the ball back.
You love the fight. You love the fight from Drew Lock. You almost pulled the Mo Claret. Go get the ball back.
Oh my gosh.
But listen, I'm not going to entertain any. Like these guys aren't going to start both. Neither one of those guys is going to start the entire season. Whoever wins the battle there, it's slappers only battle too.
So real quick, I know.
No, hold on, Dwayne. All-time national championship play that we just got a shout out to. Maurice Corrett running down Sean Taylor, may he rest in peace. But oh my goodness, what a moment there! And hey, we're talking about Drew Lock. This is like the only time we get to do it. My only thing with him, I was trying to, we talked about Josh Allen just being such an entertaining quarterback. In PFF, we have the big time throw rate and the turnover-worthy play rate. So I've every year I've taken, the guys that have the biggest difference in that, quarterbacks that are really good at, lots of big time throws, which can be more descriptive than anything, but then also they have the high turnover worthy play rate. So the last 4 years, 2018 was Ryan Fitzpatrick, 2019, Jameis Winston, 2020, Drew Lock, and 2021, Justin Fields. I don't know what it means. I'm going to call it the entertainment rating. And that's it. I talked about Drew Lock and we talked about it. Thanks guys. Dwayne, go ahead.
No, this one can be really quick too, Rich, but so are you completely out on Metcalf?
Yeah, for the large part, yeah.
And it's mostly an ADP thing for you.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's kind of how he scored. To me, my biggest issue with Metcalf is the gap he has to Lockett. Like, why is the gap between those guys so wide? Like, I find myself getting a decent amount of Lockett as my wide receiver 4 or 5 because he's just so far away from Metcalf, and they should be tighter. These are two guys that in the history of their time playing together have performed at a much tighter basis than one guy being away. And the target tree is going to be the same. Like, you got Noah Fant to it.
It seems a little weird to me how people have written off Tyler Lockett's production as like all Russ. Like, I don't think anyone's ever shown me this, advanced analytics behind this. Just like, oh yeah, look at that chemistry. Like, how is Lockett going to do this without Russ? Whereas Metcalf just gets the roaring benefit of the doubt. But, maybe the answer to the Seattle offense is just no. Certainly would make a lot of sense. Rich,
potentially could be.
Rich, great stuff. Final question for you. It's a bold prediction type thing. What do you think will be the defining storyline at the QB position in 2022?
Well, the top down answer I'll give it a second, but the things that I think for fantasy make matter the most is, are we going to see like this accuracy for a third straight season? Because if not, then that opens the door for us all to be taking quarterbacks too highly than they should be. And then secondly, why aren't all quarterbacks 2 quarterback leagues? Look at the wealth of names we covered here on the show already. This is the only position that has viable, useful NFL players that get thrown aside because they just don't fit in 1 quarterback leagues because the way it's played. Guys like Carr and Tua and Kirk Cousins and Fields. Like, everyone should be playing 2 quarterback leagues now. We're past the time. But the thing I think that's the most defining thing about the season is, which of these year 2 guys come back, baby? Which ones hit? Because this was the most like illustrious quarterback class in maybe the last 20 years, and they all sucked. They all were bad. They all were terrible last year. So who bounces back? You get a lot of value in Trevor Lawrence. Does Zach Wilson bounce back? Does Justin Fields have that ceiling, that dual upside ceiling? We're giving Lance kind of a hall pass because, like, we don't really see him play, so good for him. But, like, the year 2 quarterbacks, I think, are the guys that are going to really kind of make it.
Maybe Mac Jones is actually really good.
Oh, I think he is he's a really good real life quarterback. I don't know how much it's going to matter for fantasy, but yeah, absolutely. I think year 2 quarterbacks, though, I think all of those guys have a lot more upside still cooked in to their range of outcomes than they get credit for.
Rich, fantastic stuff. People can find you over at Sharp Football Analysis. You guys just had your preseason draft guide, I believe, come out. Of course, follow you at Lord Reeves. Anything else you want to get off your chest, my friend?
No, listen, that was the gauntlet. I look forward to seeing you guys in Canton. Everything's at Sharp Football Analysis. I have like 50 free articles. You can read all my thoughts on that. Got a bunch of stuff for subscribers as we're approaching draft season. So listen, I'm ready, man. I'm an in-season fantasy analyst. I can't wait to recalibrate. Can't wait to get both of you guys to come on my show in season. Can't wait to be talking about, all the usage that Dwayne's gonna be talking about, so we can recalibrate all these things. So listen, namaste for having me on, and good luck everybody the rest of the summer.
Absolutely, brother. Appreciate you. Dwain, final words.
Yeah, man. Just appreciate having Rich on. Always one of the best. I do have to ask Rich, because people ask me this, but I think you're like 10x me. How much of this is just memorize these stats versus how you have to read?
At this point, a lot is because I'll get on shows. I've talked about a lot of these players, so it's fine by then. So we're good. And I wrote for the Sharp Football book that's behind me. So we've done a lot and written.
Still retaining it though. It's impressive. So you're probably like 80% of it. You just know.
Yeah, good amount. Some we go
That's
back to. We're going like
man.
real deep in the streets on stats to make sure you get the accuracy on the stats. But a lot of these takes we've dropped already. So,
well, man, yeah. Again, appreciate you. I'm looking forward to even next week. I will do the first utilization report next week. Yeah, we'll just do it on starters. I'm not trying to break my back out of week 1 preseason, but yeah.
God, could you imagine that? Just here's the third string you like. Every single.
I would cry.
Might just lose listeners at that point. But Rich, great stuff. Kings stay kings as always. For Rich, for Dwain, I'm Ian. Thanks as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Until next time, take care, everybody.